Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong, and I am joined by a new guest. I'm glad that he was able to join after a lot of working around scheduling, and I am very appreciative to introduce Stanislav Krapivnik. He is a former U.S. Army officer. He is the director of supply chain in the oil and gas sector. He's a geopolitical and military analyst based in Russia. Stanislav, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great to have you on the show for the first time. Everyone hit the like button to make sure that this program gets boosted in YouTube's algorithm. So, Stanislav, I really wanted to get your reaction and take on what has been an overall picture of growing, if not already burgeoning, an ever-present World War III moment. But the latest escalation is the seizure of the Russian flag tanker, the Mariner, which occurred on January 7th. And I'm just playing the video as you speak. I wanted to get your comments because there was a Russian lawmaker who did say that Russia should provide a military response, an attack with torpedoes, and I'm just paraphrasing, and to sink a couple of American boats. This was Alexei Jurilyov, who is the first deputy head of Russia's Duma Defense Committee. Now, Stanislav, the United States, Pete Hegseth is thumping their chest, saying that Russia, China, Iran, they won't mess with us after what we've done to Venezuela. The CIA, Washington Post, I'll pull all these up in a second, is also saying that Trump has lost his patience with Putin. Has Russia and will Russia confront the U.S. over this? And what do you see as the impact and significance of this development?
There's a couple things here. First of all, if we go on the escalation ladder, Russian Orthodox Christians in general, they escalate slightly differently than the West. The West likes to incrementally, continuously escalate. If you look at the way things go, Russia, as an Orthodox country, for Orthodox Christians, war is always a sin. When the church split between the Catholics and the Orthodox, St. Augustine's just war concept was never adopted in the Eastern Church. It's always a sin. So while it's a sin, it's oftentimes a necessary sin. So you're going to have to go do what you need to do. So from the Eastern mentality is you always try to avoid war until there's no avoiding war, which something the West doesn't understand because the West takes that as weakness. So we'll just continue escalating. And while the West is escalating one step at a time, Russia will escalate. It'll hold, and it'll strike. And then you get this massive new escalation. And they go, oh, wow, what did you do that for? Why'd you drop an Oreshnik on and took out a bunch of German engineers and British maintenance people and all that in the underground underground tunnels? Well, because that's the escalation. And Putin, more so than most leaders, Putin is a pro-Western leader. He's become much less of a pro-Western leader. And this is something else that the West doesn't understand. I came back on the 24th of December from the front. I was out there escorting a certain other individual from the West. I will not name names at the moment, and showing him around so he could see it with his own eyes for certain other individuals who I will not name for now, but because I was asked not to. But we had drones coming in overhead, things like that, getting shot down, places like Avdiivka. The number one fear. Now I'll say this: the Russian soldiers want peace, but they don't want a ceasefire. They don't want any compromise. If you talk to these guys, yeah, they want peace. They want capitulation from Kyiv, destruction of NATO if it's in place, and fight to the end because they've invested way too much in this. The biggest fear of the officers and men I've talked to, and not the first time, is that the government will make some kind of deal and not finish this. So from the military standpoint, and even the average Joe on the line, their desire is we drive this all the way home and put a spike into the vampire's heart and chop its head off. And there we go. And then, and stake it out for the sun. If that means going to Kyiv, fine. If that means going to Warsaw, fine. If that means going to Berlin or Paris, fine. Whatever it takes. Putin is holding a lot of that back because, believe me, if he wasn't in place, these Western leaders are moronic beyond all belief. Hegseth is an idiot to begin with. He barely knows anything. And most of the people surrounding Trump and the unelected tyrants in the EUSSR, they're the same way. They don't understand at all. They like to focus on one man as the cause of all their problems. We just get rid of that one guy. Well, first of all, governments don't work that way because these are very hierarchical, very wide ranging structures. There's always going to be someone to take up the mantle. And two, a lot of times you may be, you're going to be biting your elbows after what you just did. And if you get rid of Vladimir Vladimirovich, I wouldn't want to be in NATO headquarters about that time, no matter how deep those tunnels run underneath, because they won't exist. Because the people that are going to take over power are probably going to do a nuclear holocaust on the West. That's the level of anger. That's the level of, Russians learned how to hate thanks to the West. The West has taught Russians how to hate because most Russian people, it's not that bad. They don't really think about it. Well, the last 4 years have opened up a lot of people's eyes. And getting rid of Putin is guaranteed to drop the Western population by about 90% very quickly. I don't know how else to say it, except as blunt as possible, because, and that's something I've been saying on the Russian side and different shows that I'm on for quite a while, is the West doesn't understand subtlety. The West doesn't understand, let's live together and, share bubble gum. The West doesn't understand all that. The West understands it's either you or me. You're either my vassal or you're my enemy or you're my next victim. That's what the West understands, is always understood. It understands power and Dane's guilt. The problem with Dane's guilt is once you pay the Dane's guilt, what do you do about the Danes? They'll always be back next year for more Dane's guilt. By the way, Venezuela, if they ever give up oil to Trump, it'll never end. That's it. You become they're the parasite. You become the host, and they will bleed you dry. So that's the reality of it. The only way you deal with people like Trump and Hegseth is you sink a ship, and then go. Next step is probably nuclear war. Your choice. The rich in the West won't go to nuclear war because it makes no sense. They don't stay rich if everything's destroyed. They don't have servants if everything's destroyed. They don't have a life. Sure, they may survive in a bunker if they can get to it sooner or later. And then what? Their comfy lifestyles and their power trips end real quick. And possibly the people in their bunkers will kill them off because they don't need them anymore. They're no longer an employee and there's nothing to employ. And I think they all know that to a degree. So there's a line that they would be insane to cross because there's no survival for them. I think that would be that line. But the only way you're going to shake them out of their psychosis there is by doing something hard enough that gets their attention.
Yeah. So would you say, Stanislav, that this is something that Russia will consider in the near or long-term future? You said that the United States does not understand the neocons, the warmongers. They don't understand subtlety. They don't really understand the Russia way of doing things. But at the same time, we see in mainstream media, Stanislav, there's a lot of gloating going on, not just by the Trump administration, but also in the mainstream media, talking about putting pressure on Russia, putting pressure on the shadow fleet. This Venezuela escalation, in many ways, Stanislav, has a lot to do with Russia. Pete Hegseth and the minions under the Trump administration, like Marco Rubio, they're all talking about keeping Russia, keeping China out. Here's what Pete Hegseth has said: Russia won't dare test, China won't dare test the U.S. after the show of military might in Venezuela. How do you respond to this? How do you react to this?
Oh, he's right. And while you're at it, why don't you come in there and try to rule Venezuela? Because welcome to Vietnam 2.0 on steroids. Never mind, you have 3 times the country with much higher mountains. The U.S. will get proxied from absolutely every direction. Never mind, they always talk about the Marxist or the leftist Hispanics. Let's be realistic. Leftists, rightists, centrists, they all have it's not even a chip. They all want a chunk of American meat because the U.S. has screwed that entire region for the last 150 years nonstop. There's been intervention after intervention, massacres of civilians, I mean, that's just the reality of it. American corporations come in, exploit everything, overthrow the local government, no matter if it's rightist, leftist, whatever, because they just want property rights to them. Exploit the people till the people break and they start rebelling. Then in come the U.S. Marines and start shooting up the people. And that's something that's been an endless cycle in that region for quite a long time. I mean, even Panama. Do you think the Colombians have, first of all, do you think the Colombians have forgotten how Panama became independent? The French tried to build the Panama Canal. They failed. The Americans came in. They offered a very low ball sum for that territory to build the Panama Canal. The Colombians, because it was all it's Colombia at that point, the Colombians said no. And the U.S. created a revolution for them. And by the way, the person that signed off the Panamanian side was the chief French engineer from the previous failed project, even a local. So none of this is actually legal in any kind of sense, but it was done anyways. So Colombian nationalists are just as pissed off as Colombian, realistically speaking, as Colombian Marxists might be. And then Panama, if you think all those people, relatives of the murdered civilians, when the U.S. came in to take out Noriega, and there were a lot of dead civilians because they're just shooting everything up. I think they've forgotten or forgiven. Maybe some of them have forgiven. A lot of them have never forgotten. And if the U.S. presents itself as an oppressive force, and it will be, because the point is, I'll tell you this: our standard SOP for dealing with a sniper was you return fire in the general direction, because you don't really know exactly where he's sitting in what room, shooting out the window. He's not hanging out the window; he's deep inside a room, so you can't really see where the shot's coming from. You shoot that general direction, you break contact, and you call in artillery. And be damned how whoever happens to be living in that area where that sniper, more or less from that area, sniper's firing. And what happens when you start killing civilians is their relatives take up rifles and go to try to kill you. And that's exactly what the U.S. breeds. Occupation breeds enemies. I'll tell you this, just so people understand. I went to church when I lived in Raleigh. We had a Greek guy there who was a partisan in World War II. He said, I'd sit there on a mountain. I'm overlooking the next mountain, and there's a village, and there are German officers there, and I'm killing them. And I know they're going to turn around and shoot 10, 20 Greeks for every person I've killed. But then all their relatives are going to join us, and the partisan movement gets bigger. And that's the logic that kicks in, sure. But the people aren't going to talk about, if that partisan hadn't killed that occupier, it's the fault of the partisan. They're going to go, well, that occupier just murdered my wife or my kids or my husband. Let's have some revenge. And that's exactly what the U.S. is going to be facing on all sides. And that's not even counting that you can get proxied by Brazil, Iran, Russia, China. Try covering all those neighboring countries when they're starting to ship in weapons and everything. You can't. U.S. military isn't that powerful. And the U.S. Merchant Marine is non-existent for the most part. I can tell you a story about that one, too. It's pretty funny and interesting.
Yeah, well, Stanislav, there were Russian citizens on board. I don't even believe we know exactly where the tanker is. Now, there was 2 Russian citizens on the Mariner. There were many Ukrainian citizens, actually 17, 6 Georgian citizens, 3 Indian citizens. Now, this comes, Stanislav, as I read in the CIA, as I call it, the CIA Washington Post, they immediately referenced Vladimir Putin, the assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin. So as this Venezuela aggression by the United States has escalated, that was happening basically at the same time as this was all being planned out. How do you see the relationship between the two? And, when you talk about the U.S. Military plans, despite the national security strategy supposedly moving away from Russia, everything that the U.S. has been supposedly shifting is also targeting Russia. How do you see this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was one of the first on this side just to say for what it is. The U.S. Trump tried to assassinate Putin. I mean, let's just call it what it is. That's exactly what happened. Sure, he was using the Ukrainian hands, but those drones didn't fly in off of Ukrainian satellites. There are none. They flew in off of data that was coming in from the American side. Maybe the British handed over. It's still American satellites. the Five Eyes share it. By the way, when the U.S. wants to, it can instantly switch off the British from Five Eyes, and they've done that before to punish them. Just flip a switch, basically, and the British are backed off and locked out. Additionally, it's the same thing as through the Israeli proxy, and it's hard to tell who proxies who more: the Israelis, the U.S., or the U.S., the Israelis, when they try to exterminate the leadership of and murder off the leadership of Iran. And I think they're still hoping to try to do that again. Well, you can only do that once or twice before everybody starts figuring out that not only can you not be trusted, in fact, maybe a first strike on you is the only logical conclusion that can be done. And the U.S. is very quickly moving into a position where everybody around is looking at it. They're acting like rabid dogs. What do you do with rabid dogs? You can't negotiate with a rabid dog. You can't throw it a bone. What's left? You put them down. And when you've got people like Marco over there talking about Colombia, Mexico, Cuba, Panama, Nicaragua. Well, guess what? You just put every single one of those countries on notice. A, B, they're going to make sure they can do everything they can to make sure you bleed out in Venezuela. Because when they say we run Venezuela, you don't. You kidnapped by buying out. Let's be frank. They bought out the leadership, or at least a portion of the leadership, military leadership in Venezuela, because unfortunately for Latin America, it has a bad Latins, starting from the Romans, have this bad tendency of generals grabbing power. You don't have that with Slavs. You don't have that with Anglo-Saxons. But you definitely have that with the Latins. You have that with the Arabs, or generals will grab power. They'll overthrow their leadership, and they can easily be bought, which, by the way, the 21 days it took the U.S. to get to Baghdad was considered that it bought half the generals, Iraqi generals, and they never left their bases. They never went into combat. It still took the U.S. 3 weeks to get to Baghdad. Consider the British a hell of a lot faster back in World War One. We're the superpower. Yeah, it took 3 weeks to go across open terrain against an enemy that was much, much weaker and had no air superiority. So I wouldn't be talking too much. I mean, if you look at realistically, Vietnam at its height, the 8 years U.S. had military boots on the ground in Vietnam, at its height was 550,000 soldiers. 550,000. So you combine the U.S. Marine Corps and the U.S. Army, you're about hitting 500,000 right now. And that's not counting everywhere it's spread out. The Guard is worn out. I mean, they're guys. What happens in the Guard, these guys constantly get activated now for a year at a time. They get back, they get fired. The employer has to keep their job, but knowing that they're going to get deployed again, they'll do anything, find any reason to fire them. Or they just won't hire them when they find out they're in the Guard. I mean, they don't have to tell you that this is the reason we're not hiring you, obviously. So the military is worn out. And once Trump gets in there, getting into these countries is easy. For the great war hero that Trump is, with 5 deferments from serving in Vietnam, the man that never put a uniform on but is smarter than everybody else. Because remember, he said, Vietnam was run by idiots, and I could have done it. Well, maybe you should have shown everybody what you could have done. Big mouth, small brain. That's what we're seeing coming from that direction, and the people around them. And look, except for Hegseth, I mean, look at the people serving them. Most of them have never put a uniform on in their lives, but they're more than happy to send everybody else's kids to die off. It's not their kids. It's not them. The U.S. will not survive in Venezuela trying to occupy a country that big with almost all the resources in the interior, with drone warfare. Triple canopy jungle. Yeah, okay. So the guy climbs up a tree and launches a drone that then takes out a tanker that's carrying fuel from the interior to the coast, or blows up the pipeline, or what have you. It's something you can always be done. And trying to control that and trying to widen that zone is going to take a lot of manpower. Short of the draft, there's the big D word for you boys and girls in the U.S., the draft. When Joe Sixpack suddenly realizes his little Johnny may be going off to be the first on his block to meet, to go to a different country, meet different people, and try not to get killed by them. That's going to be a shock and wake up to the average American, who honestly doesn't give a damn where the U.S. is. They can't find these places on the map. It doesn't touch them personally. Well, it does, because of massive debt and collapse internally, economically, and infrastructure, but they don't think about it on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, Stanislav, the Trump administration has been talking a big game. It has been saying it runs the oil, it runs Venezuela. But I'm even thinking, Stanislav, the US has captured more than a few tankers now, and it does have this so-called blockade, supposedly choking Venezuela. But even just this news story here about there being at least 16 tankers, at least trying to evade this blockade. What is the cost and what is the impact of the United States putting all of these resources into attempting to essentially stop all commercial, tankers from various countries, especially ones that are doing business with China, between China and Venezuela, Venezuela and Russia, Venezuela and Iran. What is the cost of this? And can the US even sustain this, let alone run the entire country of Venezuela?
Well, we've seen how the U.S. can't run the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is in a collapse mode. You don't have to go far in any major city. Water is undrinkable in a lot of cities. Druggies all over the place. Crime is rampant. Inflation is rampant. Apparently, paying tariffs isn't something that the manufacturer does, but the end consumer. Go shock me, don't you? Yeah, color me shocked. All these. Okay, look. Just a simple fact. By U.S. government statistics, last year, 21% of the population is fully illiterate. That's cannot read or reads to a third grade level in the U.S. That's a first grade level in Russia. Another 32% of the U.S. population reads at a third grade level to a sixth grade level. It's like first to third grade in Russia. So effectively, half the population can't read or write. They can't count because that's kind of goes hand in hand, arithmetic and the three R's. And then that's a population that's easy to manipulate, but they get used and they get crushed. The U.S. military right now, the number I heard, I don't know if this is actually true, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's costing the U.S. military about $1 billion a day to keep all those task forces in place, to keep the planes flying, to keep the ships at sea. And there's only so long you can keep those ships at sea before they have to go in. The crews have to get R&R. The ships have to be repaired. You have to get other ships rotated out. Nothing is done for free. Obviously, it all costs money. The good thing is the U.S. can't go bankrupt per se because as a sovereign nation, it can just continue printing money. The bad part is printing money devalues the U.S. dollar further and creates more inflation. As a fact, the mission statement of the private banking system called the Federal Reserve is to maintain the value of the dollar. The dollar right now has about 2% of the purchasing power it did in 1913. I think they failed. What do you think?
Yeah, and before moving deeper into Venezuela, I wanted to ask you one final question about the relationship that all of this has to Russia. What is it about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, Russia and NATO, Russia and the United States that has the Trump administration apparently seeking to thump its chest and seek other avenues from which to get what many have seen is a much needed, or what many see as a much needed foreign policy victory? It seems like he's going in all sorts of other directions while honestly still continuing the conflict in Ukraine, but saying he wants to end it.
Trump is not a deep man. In fact, I have a friend of mine who's former Russian Special Forces Soviet Special Forces Afghan veteran, who then became a U.S. Navy SEAL and wound up in the 90s being in Trump's entourage. And he knows him pretty well, and the guy is he's not all there. I'm talking about wisdom and everything else. He's a great salesman, but that's about the end of that. The guy's not deep. So to do any kind of policies, you probably sit down and you want to read up on things. And I remember before Tulsi Gabbard went and became a wallflower, she had mentioned in some interview that they're reformatting the Trump daily military or the Trump daily intelligence brief to make it look more like a Fox News broadcast. Short blurbs, no depth, highlights, blurbs, highlights, blurbs. So you don't have to think very deeply. So this is a guy that, one, it doesn't think through things all the way. Two, he doesn't have staying power. We've seen that. He'll jump from one issue to another. They will flood the news feed every day with a bunch of crap, because most of it is, just to keep the spotlight on them and keep people scurrying around and figure out what they're doing. But look, they grabbed Maduro, and now what are they doing? Now they're trying to figure out what to do next. So basically, there's step one, and then we wing it. And they even he even threw Machado under the bus. I mean, you had Bolton coming out and saying, "Oh, Machado needs to give the Nobel Peace Prize she got to Trump to get back in his good graces." I mean, you're dealing with people that are at an imbecilic level. It's like third, fourth graders in adult bodies. So they haven't planned anything. It's obvious enough because, okay, step one, it's if you ever watch South Park, they had the underwear gnomes. Step one, we steal the underwear. Step two, and then we become rich. Yeah, that's about the extent of Trump's planning window here and the people around him. It'll all fall in place. No, it won't. You want that? The American oil companies will not go into Venezuela because they'll get shot. You figure even if 5% of the population are hardcore Madurist, that's 1.5 million people. Yeah, sure, all of them aren't going to take up rifles, but quite a few of them will. Going in there without having a lot of bodyguards and a lot of security, these oil companies aren't going. They're going to drag their feet. They're already dragging their feet. Never mind the amount of investment that needs to go in there. Now, this is partially Chavez's and Maduro's fault, partially the U.S. fault. The oil infrastructure in Venezuela is in just horrible condition. Partially because Chavez and Maduro both spent the money that's supposed to go into repairs on social programs, which is stupid. And part of it, too, because they kept their reserves in the U.S., which boggles the mind, and the U.S. confiscated them. So there's just no money in this from either side to be able to fix this infrastructure. So to raise the volume of production is impossible right now. It's just simply impossible. You have to go in there and you have to invest. You have to rebuild. You have to retrain. It's a big upfront investment in the billions. And the U.S. oil companies, they're not running to do this, not in any kind of shape or form. We'll see what the U.S. government does to try to get them in there. I think short of having a military intervention, having the U.S. Work as bodyguards and protection for U.S. corporations, which, by the way, is a standard in Latin America for the last 150 years. Short of that, how are you going to get these people to go in there? Especially when there's an armed resistance, open borders, and millions of Hispanics from all spectrums of politics, except maybe the globalists, the liberal globalists, all the other Hispanics, they all want to take a pot shot at the U.S. And even Machado now, because she's been thrown under the bus and all of her people have been thrown under the bus. They're no longer needed. They're incompetent, blah, blah, blah. Well, these people have their own plans. Don't forget that. And people get sore. I mean, politics, number one, is human factor. You piss people off. The U.S. steps on the same rate. They did the same thing in Iraq because they told Ba'athist Party was the only party in town. So just like the Communist Party is the only party in town, doesn't mean everybody in the Soviet Union was a communist. Hardly, not even close. But it was the only power structure that existed. There were no other parties. So if you wanted to go anywhere up the chain in your profession, you became a party member, whether it's a teacher, a scientist, or a politician, or a general. Well, the U.S. did what? They bought off all these generals in Iraq, who, by the way, were also oftentimes heads of their clans. And in Arabic culture, oftentimes the clan is well ahead of society in general in the country. They bought them all off. They didn't come out to fight. They took control of the country, and then they fired them. And they started de-Baathification. So they just started firing all the party members, including teachers, clerks, et cetera, the people that were running the government. Well, these people that were promised a bright future if you just let the Americans in are now looking at a not so bright future because they've all been fired. They have no future. So they go and they get their clan organized, and they're all well armed, and they start a civil war, shooting up Americans, first and foremost. You're more likely going to have the exact same thing happening in Venezuela, which is the U.S. Again, it tends to repeat its own mistakes. And like I said, Trump from day one throws Machado under the bus. I mean, just blatantly insults her whatever pride and honor she still has, if any. And her future plans just all go flying out the window. And now she's even been told by Bolton, give up your Nobel Peace Prize, which, if you ever look at the people that get Nobel Peace Prize, I would never want to be in that list of people. They're mostly, a lot of them are just the scum of humanity. But so give up your prize to Trump, or you won't be in his good graces. Not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, no, definitely not, Stannis. And I wanted to now get your take. You mentioned, and you've talked a lot about the risk of a long guerrilla war should the United States go down the path that it is going in Venezuela. I would argue, Stannis, that that guerrilla war is kind of the government still right now. The United States has celebrated the kidnapping of Maduro, but we've had even the current president, now Delcy Rodriguez. Many people had suspicions of her. I haven't found any verifications of anything, but in a recent speech, she said this: "We have been very clear stance that Venezuela is open to energy relations with all parties, where all parties benefit, where economic cooperation is clearly defined in commercial contracts. That's our position. That the diversity of our energy relations we will continue to pursue. We have the largest oil reserves on the planet. It is one of the largest gas reserves, and they will be used at the service of national development. And that's how it was born, the oil industry, and that's what we'll continue to do." And Donald Trump, though, seems to have other ideas. He says, Stanislav, that Venezuela has told him that Venezuela is going to purchase only American-made products from the money that they receive from the oil deal that he is saying Venezuela has cooked up with him. There has been no confirmation of any of this. It's all talk at this point. But what do you make of all of this? Because there have been people on the streets in the millions since Maduro was kidnapped, demanding his release. I would gather that those same millions fit into your equation of should the U.S. go further militarily, they will be the ones taking up arms and fighting back. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. And Putin agreed to a ceasefire, and Putin agreed to give up property claims on land, and Putin and the Ayatollahs and all agreed to they were just going to open everything up, and they're only going to. I think he's schizophrenic, or at least he's hearing voices, anyways. And maybe there's some little devil sitting there just changing his voice from Rodriguez to Putin to whomever, and tell him things he wants to hear, or he's delusional because he's either that or he thinks that there's that old American thing about if you lie, and people believe it, then you can lie your way into a good economy, you can lie your way into anything. Well, the problem is with all these lies is they fall apart pretty quickly when the other side goes, no, we never agreed to this. What the hell are you talking about? And that's what we're seeing on this side and on everything. I mean, Trump's I don't know if you can call it foreign policy. The problem is Trump is surrounded by neocon, neolib, whatever you want to call them. And for that, just for the audience, if they don't already know it, and I hope they do, just to understand the origins of the neolibs is Trotsky. And thank God Trotsky lost to Stalin, because if Trotsky had won, there wouldn't be much of Russia left. There wouldn't be much of a lot of countries left, because Trotsky believed in continuous world revolution. It just, used the people as just the kindling of continuous world revolution, or on the bonfire. He would have sacrificed all of Russia on the bonfire world revolution, and on Poland and whoever else. So when Trotsky left, or ran for his life, before he and the ice pick became closely acquainted, he didn't sit around. He did a lot of work. He did a lot of very bad work, if you think about what it's led to. And he had his own following. And in fact, Trotsky's grandson was in the White House just the other day with Trump in the group. So you start looking at this, and you start understanding that this is continuous world revolution. You just transform the word transformed the word Marxism to democracy, which, by the way, Rosa Luxemburg, another communist who got shot in an alley, executed in an alley in Bavaria after the failed Spartan revolution, or failed Spartan push. And she said, democracy is just a stepping stone to Marxism. In a lot of ways, it is. So these people there are hell bent on just sliding everything up. And it doesn't matter if they're globalists to begin with. They're globalists. The old paradigm of right and left is pointless at this point. Let's just begin with. That's how they keep people brainwashed. The real paradigm in world politics is localist and globalist. The globalists will mutate to any kind of economic system as long as it serves their end result. Big money, big power, and feudalism basically over all these countries and the people in them. The localists, obviously, they go, well, no, we don't want to export all of our stuff and bankrupt our people. A prime example of that is Modi, why Modi had a falling out with Trump, or Trump had a falling out with Modi, when Trump said, you're going to buy our soybeans and you're going to buy our corn, end the story. And Modi said, hell no. That means my farmers go out of business. I'll have a revolution on my hands. I'm for development of India, not development of America. And Trump started going off on India after that in the same day, and the Indian delegation is up and left. So you're looking at big finance, really big global finance, which is a marauding, raiding system. Big finance does not invest in industry. Big finance does not invest in your future. Big finance destroys. It's there to grab your factory, sell it off, get the cash in hand, and get the bonuses at the end of the quarter or the half year, what have you. It's not the little bank in your village that invests in your business or your little factory, and the bankers live right there in that same village, and they want that village to succeed. This is big finance that lives on the other side of the world and really doesn't give a damn about you or anybody else. It just gives a damn about the numbers. How much can they pull out of your economy today, and so on. So. And Trump is running with it. Trump is surrounded by these people. I think Trump has always been a part of this, at least to some degree. And this week, Trump has just gone full neocon. We know who's in power. We know who's running the show now. And I'd call it, pardon my French, a shit show. It's only going to get worse. And the same thing in the direction of Russia. The same thing in the direction of China. And it's not. They're not going to back off. They have no plan B. I would equate this to when a main sequence star starts dying, it expands. The red giant, it expands because it's trying to consume everything around it to keep itself going, and then it explodes and collapses. This is the same thing with empires. These kinds of empires, they're expanding. They're trying to grab money in every direction because they're out. They need resources. They need money. Their own economies aren't functioning. But they can only do it so long before internal collapse just can't take the strain and the internal infrastructure collapses. I think that's what we're seeing right now in the U.S. because it's lashing out in every single direction. I mean, when you're putting 5-6 countries in Latin America on the death list, plus Iran, plus Russia, plus China, well, fellas, you're fighting most of humanity at this point. You're not going to win.
I mean, isn't that World War III in many respects? Because many people understand World War II and World War I as a battle between a competition between the West. But the Trump administration is kind of laying bare, Stanislav, that with Venezuela, even, and with the so-called Monroe Doctrine, Donroe Doctrine corollary, it's all about Russia and China and even Iran. I mean, how many times have we heard now from Hegseth to Rubio to Waltz? They all say, we're not going to have adversaries coming in here doing business. We are
business. The key word is business.
That's exactly what we're not going to have them here. So, Stanislav, isn't that its own kind of World War III scenario?
Yeah, I mean, World War III doesn't have to start, or a world war doesn't have to go black and white Hollywood. Big tank armies going against each other. And funny part, by the way, it's not even World War III. It's like World War V, because the French Napoleonic Wars were never counted as world wars, but they were fought literally just about on every single continent, except maybe Australia. So they're really we're like World War V right now. It's ludicrous. It may sound ludicrous, but it's being fought in different ways. Some places it's kinetic, other places it's overthrow, Other places it's financial. And like I said, when they came into Venezuela, it's obvious they bought out quite a few of the generals. Whether these generals are going to stay bought out is a different question. And whether or not they get discovered and probably get executed for treason, which they justly deserve in this case. Because what you had, if you look at the video, you had Chinooks. If you've never been around a Chinook, first of all, it's kind of embarrassing to miss a Chinook. The things are huge. They're long. They're slow. They're loud. You can't miss them whether you're firing an assault rifle, RPG, or a man pad. It's kind of embarrassing to meet and miss that damn thing. So the fact that they were using special forces, they don't fly Chinooks. They fly in little boys and Blackhawks that can go fast, can go relatively quietly. Chinook is just a gigantic piece of equipment, meant to, I think, that 40 or 50 infantry that it can carry. These things are huge. So the fact that they could fly in and not get shot down already tells you that the systems weren't activated. If they weren't activated, and those Cuban bodyguards who were specialists, more likely were killed by the Venezuelans themselves, whoever was bought off. We'll wait and find out. Maybe a few of them were shot by U.S. Special Forces coming in there, but more likely this was an inside job, and Maduro just got handed over. But the problem with buying people is you got to keep buying them. And if they get found out, your contacts are gone. I mean, there's only so many times you can do the same thing, like in Iran. U.S. and Israel, they try to behead Iran. And again, Iran is a huge government of 90 million people. It's not a one-man rule, just like in Russia and other places. Somebody pops off Trump, the U.S. government doesn't collapse. There's the next guy and the next guy and the next guy that goes in the line. Same thing with France, same thing with Russia, same thing with any of these modern big governments. But the only place you could do that is some village hitman. You take him out and the village goes into anarchy, maybe. And that's a big maybe. But the U.S. likes to concentrate on putting a name and a face on every one problem and concentrating on that, because to do anything else is to actually have to think your way through things. It means you have to understand the problem that you're dealing with, and you have to understand the structure that you're dealing with. It's much easier just to put a guy's face up and say, yep, we just get rid of him. That'll be it. We'll all be swimming in gravy after that. It doesn't work that way. It never has. So that's where we're at right now.
Those are great points, Stanislav. And here, despite all of what you're saying, which I think makes a lot of sense, we're getting a lot of what makes no sense coming out of the Trump administration regarding Venezuela and really all of so-called U.S. foreign policy. Donald Trump is not only saying that he controls and that the U.S. controls all of Venezuela, controls the Venezuelan government, its economy. He's saying it's going to happen for many, 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 many years, that it's unclear. It's unclear how long the United States aims to control the country. And of course, the so-called mainstream Western media there in the New York Times is just lapping it up. They're just repeating this as verifiable fact. But talk about this factor that no one really talks about when it comes to war, when it comes to this kind of power struggle that's happening in the world. What in the hell does the U.S. have to offer? Because it's one thing to destroy and destroy and destroy, but that doesn't necessarily lead to victory. So what's your what's your take on this? Because I think about this all the time. Wherever the U.S. Is doing its dirty wars, its dirty business, its warmongering, it's like, well, what do you have to offer, during this, pillaging and raping and destruction that you're attempting?
The problem is with the U.S., like any civilizational factor, is the U.S. has no civilizational idea. Whatever the American dream, what have you, was, it's gone. It had a window back in the 50s and 60s, and maybe it was the, quote, golden age of Ronald Reagan in the 80s, which was questionable how golden that was, really. But the big golden age really was the 50s and the 60s, post-World War II era, pre-Vietnam. But since then, what has the U.S. got to offer any country? We're going to come in and we're going to rape you. We might kill a few of your people, or we just steal your resources. But you'll be better off because we'll bring you, quote, democracy that we're going to rule from. That is puppets. And if you don't like it, we'll just overthrow your government again. that's not a civilizational idea that anybody's going to latch onto except the people in the US that are making money off of this. And to the average American, that doesn't make any sense either because they're not making anything out of this. They're just having to pay and sacrifice their sons and daughters for various adventures. And I'm not just pointing at Trump. Trump is just part of that kabuki theater. It's one bird, two wings. Democrats, Republicans. There's no real difference between them. And we see this. It's that it's my team mentality. I personally, I don't particularly watch sports. Just get bored. I'll go to sports. If I'm at a stadium, it's kind of interesting. Watching on TV, it's pointless. I don't particularly watch TV. I don't have time for it. But I never understood this. Everybody's dying and screaming, and about 11 guys on a team that they don't know. Most of them are not from their town. They're hired out. And they're, oh, but this is the same thing in politics in the U.S. What we see in most of MAGA is they're not against endless wars. They're against endless wars that the Democrats are waging. They're quite fine with endless wars that the Republicans are waging because that's what you see right now. Now, I'm not saying everybody. A good chunk of MAGA said, screw this. We didn't vote for this. We voted for the exact opposite. But I'd say probably 2/3 of MAGA is just fine now that it's their team and their side doing nation building or threatening to do nation building. As far as the U.S. military, there's a Russian saying, before you start splitting a fish, you got to catch it. The U.S. military, the only part of Venezuela the U.S. owns is the embassy, the U.S. embassy. That's it. You haven't put boots on the ground. You don't control the government. You don't own anything. You kind of have to come in and take it first. At least have the decency to try to do that instead of they're sitting on the other side of the Western Hemisphere and going, oh, yeah, we own all of this. Just give us $3 billion worth of oil and this and that. Well, gentlemen, you don't own anything. You own that little bit of sea that's underneath your aircraft carriers and underneath the rest of your ships. You don't own jack. You're actually going to have to go do some bleeding if you want to own the Venezuelan resources and then do a lot more bleeding and continuously do more bleeding. Trump, I think, is at least aware enough that if the casualties start rolling in and he has to call a draft. And by the way, the U.S. military, now Hackseth is planning on fixing that, and he should. That's the only proper way of doing things. The U.S. military has an obesity rate of 20%. That was last year. 20% obesity, not overweight, obesity rate. The year before was 16% obesity rate. When I served, there wasn't a 1% obesity rate. You balloon out as an officer, senior NCO, go write a resume. Your career is over. If you're a junior NCO or an enlisted man, you got somebody senior to you riding roughshod over you, watching everything you eat, exercising the crap out of you to drop that weight to the next whatever, how many months you're assigned the next physical. That was just unacceptable. Now you look at these guys, it's like, oh my God. Plus you've got women in the infantry and tanks, etc. And before some feminist goes, oh, but that's equality. No, it's not. Women's these aren't GI Janes. Women's bones are more brittle than men. You're looking at future invalids because their hip bones and their leg bones are wearing out faster than men. You get a woman that weighs about 60 kilos. 120 pounds, 130 pounds, and you're going to get about that much equipment on top of her if you're an infantryman. And then I watch these training videos. It's horrible to watch. They can't get up and run, and they're getting screamed. They get up, and they're getting up so slowly. Well, there's another Russian saying, "Pulya dura." The bullet is stupid. The bullet doesn't give a damn who it kills. It just executes its purpose in life. Fly straight, hit something. And if it's a woman that can barely move under all that weight, she dies just like anybody else that can barely move. The only thing that keeps infantrymen really alive is speed and mobility. And you watch that, so who are you going to send? The biggest anti-commercial for the U.S. military are former U.S. military. Guys have been deployed 6-8 years, quite literally, to Afghanistan, to Iraq, that, they're mentally broken, their families are destroyed, 20 plus suicides every day and continuing, 100,000 plus homeless veterans that nobody gives a damn, veteran hospitals that are something on the level of a Middle Ages butcher shop. And what do? They tell their brothers, their sons, their friends, don't go serve. It's not worth it. You're going to get abused, and thrown out. So the U.S. military now has to figure out how it's going to, quote, man Venezuela. I mean, you can sit and lap up all this crap Trump puts out all day long, but sooner or later the question is going to raise up. And okay, so you made all these announcements for the last 2 weeks, and the results are what? The results are, oh, we're going to have to bomb them because they're not doing what we want. Well, okay, that still doesn't get you the oil and the raw resources and everything else. I mean, you could do that in Greenland. There's only 56,000 people. You could probably do that in Iceland. Seems like Iceland may be the next target after Greenland. And Iceland has a lot of rare earths and has a huge amount of electricity, which is great for Google and everybody else that needs a lot of electricity for the data centers. But, you can do those little tiny countries. There are islands in the middle of nowhere where nobody can help them. It's kind of hard to do a place like Venezuela. But we'll see.
Mhm.
We'll see. The idiot circus is riding high.
I was going to say, too, Venezuela, a country of millions upon millions upon millions of people that are not divided. You mentioned earlier, division among ethnic lines, among religious lines. I mean, people in Venezuela, this is not the case. Most people in Venezuela see themselves as Venezuelans, and Venezuelans who they've had the same government since 1998, Stanislav. This is not a government that is, it's not shaky. It's not rocky. It's one that has withstood already some of the most brutal forms of economic warfare, and now they're pushing them to the brink. I mean, how could this end well in the midst of also, I mean, the United States is in all of these theaters too. It's in the Ukraine theater still. We know this, with the CIA and all of this. It's in the theater of West Asia, especially Iran now, these protests, the threats of more strikes. It's still in the Asia Pacific, trying to surround China. How does the U.S. manage this, Stanislav?
Well, if the U.S. was smart, unfortunately, there aren't too many smart people left in power. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene get pushed out because they stand in the way. But if the U.S. was smart, they'd learn from past experience. Ukraine is a prime example. So the U.S. coups the government in 2014. What happened in the East? Okay, we're not going to talk about Crimea, which is 90% or 80% ethnically Russian, and the 10% Ukrainian are still ethnically Russians, and then 10% Mongol or Tatar, as they're being called. But I mean, these are originally Mongols that arrived under Genghis Khan. Well, I guess it wasn't Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan was dead already at that point, but under the Mongols when they took the area. Well, these other locations in the East, they blew up, but they weren't out for separation. Their demand was federalization. I know it's an insane this form of government, federalization. Like in the U.S. and Germany and a lot of other countries, they wanted the right to elect their governors instead of having oligarchs placed over them that were there just to suck things dry and pass a portion up to the big man in Kiev. They wanted a say in how their taxes were spent. They wanted some investment back into their cities, which hadn't seen investment in 20 years. So they were demanding federalization. Well, the Ukrainians did what? The psychopaths that the U.S. brought to power started shooting. Well, again, there was a small group, and some of them were veterans and volunteers from Russia that came in because everybody's got relatives across both borders. I do all over the place, for example. They came in into places like Slavinsk and they fought. But that could have been if the Ukrainians had any brains in their head and their American their American patrons had any brains in their head, that could have been avoided from escalation. Instead, they just opened fire on the cities. Well, very quickly, the people that just want federalization start figuring out they're killing our relatives. They're killing our families. We're going to go kill them back. And you got a full-blown civil war. Again, that's happens because it's just indiscriminate shelling of cities, of kindergartens, of everything. Poroshenko even had his little famous speech where he said, our children will go to kindergarten, their children will sit in bomb shelters and basements. Nobody forgot that. Now Ukraine's getting a taste of that same medicine. And even for that, the Russian forces aren't targeting civilians, unlike Ukraine. So you would think that people would learn, but they don't. They don't read history. They don't even look at immediate history where they screwed up. They just don't learn. Look, Afghanistan collapsed, and it was going to collapse. Now, the question is, has a single general ever been stripped of rank or retirement and answered for that collapse and that colossal waste of money? Of course not. Nobody ever carries any kind of responsibility. I was supposed to go to, I was an instructor at the Gold Green Academy at Fort Bragg. We were supposed to, right before I left the military, we were supposed to go to Afghanistan. For some reason, last minute, we got replaced by another unit, and they went. And I watched a documentary film that a British director had filmed about all of this. And you see, when the Soviet Union left Afghanistan, the Afghan government stood for 3 more years fighting constantly from all directions, and only fell when Yeltsin cut them off from resources, fuel, ammunition, so on. The American military that Petraeus built and spent trillions of dollars on collapsed in less than a week. And I'm watching this video, and thank God I didn't go, because I don't have I'm patient enough, but I don't have the patience to deal with these guys. I probably would have murdered somebody over there. And you got these 2 guys that basically would have been me and my fellow instructor, and they're sitting there like, we're supposed to have gone on a patrol an hour ago, and you see a gaggle of opiumed up Afghan pseudo soldiers in mixed uniforms. One's got an American Kevlar helmet on backwards, which you've got to really be out of your, you got to be really fried to do that. And they're like, "Where's your officer?" And to the interpreter, like, "Oh, the major quit." Like, "What do you mean he quit?" So they go to this major, as major speaks English. Like, "Oh, I quit. I don't want to play this game anymore. They don't respect me. I quit," with that kind of accent. It's like crap. And they're like, "Oh, sorry, you're an officer. You can't quit. This is your country. I don't care. I quit." Blah blah blah. And you're looking at the structure that the U.S. spends trillions of dollars on. Petraeus swears up and down that this is great and it's ready, it'll stand, and it collapses in under a week. But again, you think somebody would learn? No, they don't. They just continue making the exact same mistakes because they make money off of it. They don't even need to win the wars. They just need to make money off of the wars. And it doesn't matter how many Americans or how many foreigners, for this case, get killed. It doesn't matter. They're not real people. For all those people listening, when they talk about, they want to cut down the carbon footprint, you heard a carbon footprint they want to cut down. That's the point there. You're irrelevant. You are a biological unit that can be used, abused, and thrown out of the way. Big finance doesn't care about you, like it or not, but that's exactly how it is. They care only about public opinion so much as not to have an explosion inside the U.S., not because Americans are getting killed. For those that think that, oh, we're special. You're not. To the globalists, you're not. You're just more meat or more to be fleeced. And that's the reality of it. There's very few governments, major governments, that actually care about their people. Russia is one of them. China is one of them. And North Korea is one of them, actually. I wouldn't probably live in North Korea, but if you look at it overall, they do take better care of their people than the vast majority of the European Union.
This is true.
Yeah, face the reality of it. That's and these
Facts.
people were under sanctions for what, I don't know, last 70 years, since the 50s. So, it is what it is.
No, it is. And your point here about making money, Donald Trump has already announced it, Stanislav. He said that the military budget has to go up, not to $1 trillion, but to $1.5 trillion. And he did it at the same time that he was wagging his finger at the so-called military-industrial conflicts, right? So he's wagging his finger saying, "Oh, all of your stock buybacks, that's bad. We need to build weapons faster." And then he's like, "Hey, do you want another let's up this to 1.5 trillion and you'll be happy. You don't have to do stock buybacks. We'll just give you the money."
There was first of all, there's also supplementary spending. So you're probably looking at another $500 billion in supplementary spending that's going to go through in 2026. Second of all, there's the Department of Veteran Affairs. In almost all governments, Ministry of Defense or War also includes the veteran services. In the U.S., they split that out. But the best part was there was an NGO about 7 or 8 years ago that went through line item by line item of the entire U.S. budget and counted up what was actually military. And they came out with something like 25% of the U.S. budget, 26% of the U.S. budget is military, including Hollywood movies. Those Marvel superheroes, everything else, they're actually sponsored by the U.S. military. All those movies, and then there's military censors there, by the way, too, for all of Hollywood. So the
Yep.
U.S. is a military state, and not a very efficient one, but it's a military state. That's where most of the money goes.
Yep. Stanislav, do you have any time for a rapid fire? We had a lot of good audience questions, actually. If you have any few more minutes however
Yeah,
quickly you
sure,
want to answer them. All right, here we go.
sure.
Here's one right here. How long are the Russian people going to put up with appeasement and lack of response from Putin? What do you have to make of that kind of question?
Well, I don't know because the Russian people don't believe in particularly changing horses in the middle of a race. There is that one part. Putin does have a lot of popularity, one way or the other. He's got well over 80% popularity. It's taken a hit because Russia hasn't responded forcefully enough. I think at this point, all of this partially, I think they're buying time. Secondly, I think all this hope and copium of we can make a deal with the Americans is pretty much so run its course. Trump has shown himself to be what he really is, what he always was, by trying to murder Putin, flat out. Let's call it what it is grabbing Russian hostages, and has just gone off the reservation. Trump is fully off the reservation, or as the English like to put it, he lost the plot. So, yeah, what I'll tell you this: what I've noticed on X and other media lately is the pan-Europeanistic move. Now that Trump is threatening Greenland and maybe Iceland, the pan-Europeanism of, hey, Russians are also part of Europe. We should all band together. No, buddies, you made your bed or you made your grave. Go lay in it. Russia is not going to spend a single drop of Russian blood or one gold chervonets for the European Union. It can go rot in hell for what most Russians aren't going to invade Europe. We don't. Well, we're a third of Europe. We're fighting for our homeland. We're doing it very slowly, vacuuming up the Ukrainian forces and just exterminating them. That's the best way to put it. But we're not going to invade the rest of Europe. Why would we want it? Resource poor, degenerate culture, collapsed economies, the antiquated infrastructure. I mean, Europe as a whole can't even come up with one fifth generation fighter. Russia and America and China are putting out, are testing for sixth generation fighters. Europe can't. Europe can barely do fourth generation plus. They can't even do higher. The Gripen, there's like, oh, we did the Gripen. Yeah, if you like to look at it, it's almost 50% American parts. Europe can't make anything. They're incompetent. They can't even make airplanes anymore because the parts come from all over the world, and they used to come from Russia. Russia wasn't just oil and gas. Russia was everything. Russia was food, fertilizer. Russia was automobile parts for BMW. Russia was your wood products, paper. I mean, the German newspapers closed down paper newspapers because they didn't have paper once they launched all the sanctions to print newspapers on. You know, so there's that. Well, we'll see. We'll see in the end.
Well, there's a few other good questions here, Stanislav. I wanted to put this one out there for you. Should the U.S. government hand over the letters of marque to the U.S. Navy commanders? Not sure what the context of this question is, but maybe you do.
Well, the letters of marque were letters that were given out to privateers, to pirates. They were just government sanctioned pirates.
Oh,
Look,
right.
you can pirate all the other guys, but you don't pirate us, and we'll give you we'll let you have our ports and drop the booty off at our and sell it at our ports. That's the letter of marque. So I don't think they need a letter of marque. they're ready in the U.S. military for executing. I don't know if I'd say. Well, they are illegal workers because it's high seas piracy. That's the only way you can describe it. The pirate king of DC.
Yeah, and here's another good question from Empire We Are. Question for you and Stas, to both of us. How do Russia and China keep their oligarchs in check? Billionaires and now some newly minted trillionaires are running the show in the West.
Well, it's several ways. If you remember, people like Khodorkovsky were arrested. They were arrested because Khodorkovsky was told Russian oil fields will be in Russian hands. You can have them in your company, but they're not going to be sold off to foreigners. He said, "Screw you! I'll do whatever I feel like." Well, he got arrested for that because he was told directly by the government. in the end, I mean, there was a big power struggle that probably did a good job on breaking Russian development in the 2000s as Putin was consolidating power. And some oligarchs were co-opted into the government, and well, they get some breaks here and there. Some oligarchs were forced out, some were arrested. A lot of them were just told, you can do the business side, but you're not getting into politics. If you get into politics, we'll destroy you. That's the only way to do it. Plus, Russia isn't that big on big finance. It's a manufacturing power. It's, I think, about the fourth largest manufacturing base in the world. And if you look at by PPP, purchasing power parity, that's how economists compare with a basket of goods different economies, because you can't do straight FX. It's ridiculous. Americans make so much more. Yeah, you pay $5 for a real loaf of real bread. In Russia, it costs you 50 cents. It doesn't equate. So you have to use some kind of what's called a neutral dollar. But if you look at it that way, which is how economists actually do look at things, like economies, China is 30% bigger than the U.S. The U.S. is not just in second place, it's deep in second place. And if you take out the 30% or so of the U.S. that's the financial sector, that really produces nothing but debt, all of a sudden the U.S. is about the size of India in all reality, and Russia's right behind India and climbing. So the U.S. is collapsing. None of America's little strumpets in that Bordeaux are anywhere in the top four, in the top five, and they're all falling, and they're all falling rapidly, partially because they don't have an industrial base. If you don't make anything, you don't have anything. That's the reality of things. And Trump's tariffs are actually torpedoing U.S. industry, because if the U.S. manufacturing facility sells only in America, I mean, most of these manufacturing facilities, they get at least some of their parts imported in. Sure, they'll pay tariffs on that part or that bit of a parts, but they'll probably still be more competitive than an end product that's being moved into the U.S. from another country that's fully tariffed. Now, that's as long as they sell in America. The moment they try to sell to any other country, they're paying those tariffs, and goods from China or Vietnam or Iran or what have you, they're not being tariffed. They're not going to the U.S. So those companies automatically have a big advantage on price over the U.S. So the U.S. has just torpedoed its own industry. That comes from not knowing economics. And Bassett, I don't know how. I think Bassett's sexual orientation was his biggest game changer for that position, because it definitely doesn't seem to be his knowledge of finance and economics. You listen to the man, and it's just cringe. It's the guy is just, he has no clue, and he's just lashing out in every direction. It's definitely not from knowledge. So I don't know. DEI hire. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we began this. Well, we began this conversation, Stanislav, with the bluster of the Trump administration, and we go all the way back to the beginning, the trade war. That was the first war that the Trump administration declared itself victorious in, when actually it was getting the floor wiped with it by China. And on the China side, it's very similar. I mean, I've been to China several times. You just go there, you see how much more highly developed China is than the United States, and very similar to what you said about Russia, the emphasis on manufacturing. But the big key part is keeping, when it comes to politics and the character of the state, the government, keeping these newly minted billionaires that are coming out and making a lot of money. They have to stay in the economy, and they have to follow the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, they're punished. If they don't follow the law, they're punished. Now, it doesn't mean that no one's getting away with anything, but it does mean that there's always going to be a priority on the national interest. And let's be quite honest, just like Russia, in Russia, in some respects, was forced to do this, China in a lot of respects as well, their banking system is state-owned. It's government banking. It's not private banking. There's no Bank of America and Citibank or all the financiers on Downing Street in London. None of that exists in China, and I'm guessing none of that exists in Russia either.
Disagree with you on that. There's lots of Russia has a huge amount of banks. A lot of them are small banks that have gone out of business because they were just leveraged. But Russia has quite a few very large private banks. Raiffeisen's one of them, interesting enough, the Austrians. Alpha Bank, T-Bank. There's a bunch of them, but it doesn't have the huge financial sector that the U.S. has.
Right.
And you know what? The sanctions have been a great help. Thank you for the sanctions, because I'll tell you one of the things the sanctions did, switching Russia off from SWIFT and keeping Russian money from being able to flow out. Well, one step back. 80% of the foreign companies never left. Some rebranded, others are just working the same way they always worked. They never rebrand. I mean, Burger King's all over the place. McDonald's becomes Точка, Вкусная точка, so tasty period, which, by the way, McDonald's has an 18-year lease or 18-year open window just to buy back everything on market value in that sales contract, and on and on and on. But now these companies, they can't take their money out. So whether or not they invest that money, the money is in the banking system and it gets invested. And a lot of them are just doing investments under the radar from the Western media that are investing all over the Russian economy. So finally, thank you, West. Please don't throw me in the briar bush, or throw me more in the briar bush. That's a golden briar bush at this point. So that money, instead of flowing out as profit taking by these corporations, which is legal, I mean, it's their invested money, but instead of being able to take it out as profit taking off of their investments, all that money just stays in the economy and keeps spinning. Invest in making more money by being invested in manufacturing, and right off the bat, by the way, all these people that don't have jobs in the U.S., Russia's hiring. We don't have enough. We produce more engineers than any other country in the world. We don't have enough engineers. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough plumbers. We don't have enough carpenters. The country is booming. You go to any city except some of the most remote ones, and everything's booming. Industry's booming. We literally don't have enough people. Unfortunately, we also had a lot of people that decided to be lawyers and business majors that have to wind up working in a factory anyways because there's no jobs for them. 10,000 lawyers for every position. Who really needs them? Sooner or later, you got to feed the family. But we need people flat out. We need talented people. Housing booms are still going. So there's that. There's a way out to live a normal life. Most Americans will never do it because they're afraid to move out of their own states. Unfortunately for them, their ancestors had a lot more pick up and go than they do. But there's that, and Western propaganda is insane when you listen to some of it. But there's that. Yeah. China's booming too. So yeah, even when they say, "Oh, China's slowed down," okay, so it went from 10% growth to 6% growth.
6%, exactly.
Wow, 6%. Damn, that's.
And then if you look at it relatively, everyone else, for the most part, not everybody, not Russia, not some others, but for the West especially, they're all growing at what, -1%, 1%, -2% in Europe, 0%, 2% in the US. It's sluggish stuff going on in the collective West.
The Russian rise in the economic ranks, we have to thank the Germans too, because they helped us out by collapsing their own economy. I mean, you've got to be a special level of stupid to do the things that they've done. And you got to be even a bigger level of stupid to actually support these parties that deindustrialized Germany, that de-energized Germany, that just basically want the Germans to go back to burning peat in their little huts in the middle of a field and work in the field with their hands and rakes because they can't afford fuel for the tractor anymore. That seems to be the green idea. We'll just kill off half the population and drive everybody back into medieval Europe. Not the best of ideas, but yeah, I guess it works for some people, especially if they are not the ones that have to do it.
Right. And this, I'll let you close out on this. Is there no hope, Stanislav? I think we kind of answered that question, but if you have any final words before we head out together on this.
Well, there's a Russian saying, "Надежда умирает последняя, hope dies last." So there's always hope. There's hope in God. There's hope in the future. If you don't have any hope, I mean, at all, you should have rational hope. You shouldn't have irrational hope, but you should have some hope. Otherwise, what's left? Go shoot yourself. That's not hope either. That's not a way out. Sure, there's hope. I'll tell you, the U.S., there's hope after the collapse. You can't make something great again when it's rotten through. When it collapses, you can build something off of its foundation, or when that house is that wooden house is fully worm fed and collapsing, you can at least turn those boards into fertilizer and then grow and build something better on top of that. But you cannot fix something that's rotted through and through and through. And the U.S. system and the Western European system is absolutely rotted through. From that point of view, there is no hope for that system. There's hope to something after that system. And I think the collapse is going to come a lot faster than most people understand. And you hear the same thing from people that don't read history past maybe dates and names. History cycles. It's always cycles. And if you read history, what does history tell you? Everything goes in its cycle. Things collapse slowly, and then they go really, really fast. The wooden supports rot slowly over the years, but when it collapses, it's over in a few seconds. That's the reality of it. When the real collapse comes, it's sometimes it's like lightning strike. And then everybody goes and looks at lightning and says, "Oh, see how fast it collapsed." They don't see that 30 years has been rotting in place.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great time, Stanislav.
Same.
This was a great conversation. We're going to have to do it again soon. We're going to head out together. I want to make sure everyone hits the like button because I will keep this conversation going after we are done live on the replay. Everyone can find the ways to support this channel in the video description below, Patreon, Substack, and so much more. Stanislav, is there anywhere you'd like me to point viewers in terms of your work?
Sure. There's Mr. Slavic Man on YouTube, Slavic with a K, not a C. There is Telegram. The Russian channel, the Russian language channel is Stas Tуда y Obratno. And the English channel is Stas was there. There's Twitter, or you want to call it these days, Twitter, X, and that's Stanislav Krapivnik, or at Stanislav Krapivnik.
Great.
So
yeah,
that's
I'm
about
linking your channel now. Yeah, I'm gonna link your YouTube channel, and I'll make sure to get those other links after this, so you can all find them in the video description. And we will have to return again, Stanislav, here on a time that suits you. But until then, everybody, hit the like button, and I will be back with all of you very soon as we continue to cover these developments. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Danny.